When I'm playing my Black Templars on the tabletop, an absolute MVP unit comes from a very unlikely source, and that is the Space Marine Suppressors, one of the oddest things in the Space Marine range. A relatively new unit, a Primaris unit, but not one that Games Workshop has put a lot of emphasis on. These are my Space Marine Suppressors, and I love them. I went with an alternate color scheme, white armor with black shoulder pads, and that is because these guys are the Emperor's Avenging Angels. Well, technically all Space Marines are the Emperor's Avenging Angels, but these guys are literally angelic, dropping from the sky to unleash fury with their accelerator autocannons. When I take these suckers to the game store, I get a lot of double takes because people are like, what are those? And I don't really blame them because these are a very weird unit. These guys came out in the 2019 Vanguard Task Force box, and they've only ever been available in that box, which is a rather expensive box paired with a whole bunch of other Phobos Space Marine units. Available only for online order, and I think that exclusivity is why you don't see them in a lot of Space Marine lists, because I think they're great. Well, maybe not great, but they're pretty good, and I like them a lot. And unfortunately, the only real way to get them is to order them off of eBay. And maybe I ordered some more. These guys have been consistently overperforming in my game, so I want some more on my list. Buying these off eBay is a bit risky. I have to hope the seller did a good job finding all the parts to build these guys, who are mixed up together on the sprue with a lot of other units. It looks like they're all here. This squad came out without much fanfare from Games Workshop. They even cheaped out on the sculpting. Two of these guys are the same guy. You can really tell with the purity seals on the shoulder pad. I'm surprised I let this happen on my first squad, but I can do better now. I clipped out the parts. These might look like Gravis and Scepters, but they're actually just normal Marines with some flying bits on them. Not even jump packs, just wings and extra exhaust. They're a very odd unit. I have the pieces to build this guy, and I want to go out of my way to alter everything I can, starting with the chest. I nipped off the Imperialis and then scraped away the rest of the symbol with my hobby knife. Then, lining up the gun, I can get rid of this very plain shoulder pad and replace it with something much more interesting and Templar-y. Unfortunately, these guys are monopose, with the shoulder sculpted on, so I had to hack it away and then smooth it over with my Dremel. I worked it down into a normal shoulder, and I made it work. Once I had it all clean, I could glue the gun in place, and I noticed that when I cut the chest symbol off, the little skull clipped off super clean. I glued it right back to where it was to give this chest a little bit more bedazzling. Once I got the backpacks on, I glued on a shoulder pad from the Black Templar Sword Brethren kit, and for the helmet, I want to glue on something old school. I have this alternative head from Tortuga Bay Miniatures. This head is based on the old Mark VI helmet, the Sneaky pattern. Very appropriate for this Vanguard Space Marine. With it all built, I loaded him up with a couple more purity seals, and number 1 is done. For the next guy, I also shaved off the Imperialis from the chest, and I ground off one of the shoulders. He also got a Templar shoulder, this time from the Crusader Squad kit, and I grabbed my Space Marine bits box looking for a head. I found the heads that I didn't use from the last squad I put together. They're kinda cool, but I want something old. I glued on a Devastator Space Marine helmet and threw on some extra purity seals, and this guy, number 2, is also done. On to the last guy. This fella, I left the chest alone, but I ground off both shoulder pads. One side got a Templar's cross, and for the other, I put on a Deathwatch shoulder pad. In the lore, every Space Marine chapter sends a tie of the Battle Brothers to the Deathwatch, and if a Marine survives long enough to complete their tour of duty, they return to their parent chapter, a Deathwatch veteran, and continue wearing the shoulder pad, and I also glued on a Deathwatch helmet too. Now that he's done, I drilled out the gun barrels, which was tricky. They have this slot in the front that was hard to get my drill into. Once I had the hole started, I made it bigger by stepping up my drill bits to a bigger size, and then to get it perfect, I used this Dremel reamer bit to widen the hole slowly, checking so that I could make sure the hole was lining up perfectly. Then I used my hobby knife to open up the holes on the side. These autocannons might not do much in game, but they do look really cool. My second batch of Inceptors, or Suppressors. Inceptors are a very different unit, although you wouldn't really know it to look at these guys. Even though they look just like Inceptors, they actually aren't wearing Gravis armor. These are just normal Space Marines in Tacticus armor. So 2 wounds, toughness 4, 3 guys. This is actually probably the weakest unit in the Space Marine Codex. But for me, they're one of the best units. I love these guys. Every game I take them, they score me like 10 points. And that is not down to their stat line, because honestly, their stat line is pretty bad. The accelerator autocannons that these guys have look very impressive, but mathematically, they don't super work out. 3 shots apiece, so 9 shots hitting on 4s. So you're probably gonna get 3 or 4 shots through. Then strength 8, pretty good, wounded Space Marines on 2s, but then AP -1. So if you're shooting at Space Marines, they're gonna be getting a 4-up save. So on average, you might kill 1 Space Marine. But that's not why these guys are good. The reason that these guys are good is Deep Strike, Grenades keyword, and they have movement 12. So these guys, I can get them anywhere I want on the board very, very easily. They win me secondary missions. These guys are so good at standing in random terrain pieces, or being in the enemy's deployment zone, or just at the end of the game running onto a far-flung objective and scoring me a little bit more on primary. I really like these guys. 1 squad of 3 has gotten me very far in game. I don't know if 2 is going to be the move, but I have been taking the lieutenant with combi weapon, and now that he's gone up to 85 points, where these guys are only 75 points, I think maybe a second squad of these guys are gonna do just a little bit better than taking 1 fancy lieutenant. Although he does have stealth and infiltrate and lone operative, he's got all of those different stats, but he's still only movement 6, where movement 12 is pretty spicy. I don't know, I'll have to try it out on the table, but first, I gotta get these guys up in the air. I grabbed some Cobalt Keep 40mm bases. I am not gonna be using the clear flying stands the models came with. Instead, I'm gonna make my own mountains. I grabbed some thick 1/2 inch cork, available at EonsOfBattle.com, and glued some chunks together to make some fat spikes. I cut them flat on one side to glue down to the base, and then tore them up with my fingers until they looked like the peaks of cliffs. Then I broke out the Milliput. I used this to smooth the transition between the base and the cork, and once I had it on there, I grabbed the wood filler putty and smeared this over the cork using my fingers to wipe away the excess. Then I grabbed a damp paper towel and wiped away even more, leaving this in the deepest recesses in the cork. After about 5 minutes, I hit these pieces with a toothbrush to knock away even more of this putty, so the texture of the cork shows through. The putty just bulks them up and gives them a smooth, windswept look. I took some texture paste and put this on to the bottom half of each spike to make a sandy transition onto the base. And on the flat base, I painted on some wood glue and sprinkled some small pebbles, coarse sand, and fine-grained sand, just like I do on all my Templars bases. Now to attach my flyboys. I want them just barely touching the rock so that they look like they're floating. I drilled up into the model's feet. They have these extra cushion things that I drilled right through so that I could drill way up into the Marine's leg. Then I inserted some 1mm brass rod. I lined them up with the base to figure out the angle and then drilled down into the cork. The drill bit only goes about 2 inches, but that's fine. It starts the hole for me, and then once the brass rod slips through this section, it stabs into the cork, giving it more grip. After triple checking that I'm happy with the angle, I loaded up the long brass rod with lots of super glue and then shoved it into the cork. These connections look very delicate, but it's pretty strong. My old Suppressor squad has done up in the same way, and they have never broken in the many years I've had them. Now that the build is done, I hit them with the black prime through the airbrush, and then a white zenithal from above. I do this in 2 coats so that the brightest spots are brilliantly white, especially important for the color scheme I'm trying to replicate. I've got my second Suppressor squad prepped and ready to go. The previous squad I painted up in 2021, just about 5 years ago, and I reviewed the footage of how I painted them before. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised they turned out as good as they did, seeing the steps that I did. I think they're hard carried by how great the color scheme is. The white armor with the red and black accents is really striking. And now that I've got 5 years more experience, I think I can do an even better job on the new squad. To start off, I want to dull the white a little, run an ashen stone through my airbrush. This is a semi-transparent speed paint that I sprayed on, which darkens the white a little and smooths the transition between the white and the black primer that's still visible. After that, I put on some Battleship Gray, which has some blue in it. This cold color will trick the eye into making the white look cleaner and brighter. I hit all 3 of my guys with a coat of satin varnish, then I started picking out this stuff. On their guns, I put on some Noble Skin. I love this color on guns. It's a dark gray black with some brown in it that looks fantastic under some silver dry brushing. Then I painted the Aquila, grenades, their extra shoes, and all the other metal bits with some silver paint. I picked out these parts because these are the colors I want under the next step, black paneliner. This is an enamel paint, and I picked it so that I can have complete control over how much it stains and where. And you know what else looks good with some black paneliner? That's right, our website. On EonsOfBattle.com, we have all kinds of hobby goodies, Great Head Studio bits to spice up your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, base and cork, and we have glue. Ultra thin and ultra thick super glue. And we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. In April, we have created the Armored Accessories Bits Pack. This set is full of awesome components to make your vehicles as unique and characterful as your infantry. With all kinds of equipment, storage, barrels and tools for your tanks to carry, seals and tassels that are vehicle sized, big ol' missiles, and extra armor. So many pieces of armor plating in different sizes and styles, so your tanks can get an armored treatment that looks best on them. Whether it's a futuristic war machine, an ancient Hulk, or a chaotic monstrosity, these accessories will have your tanks covered. This Bits Pack is by tank players for tank players and is available both digitally and physically printed for you at EonsOfBattle.com. I let this enamel layer mostly dry, then I went back in with some makeup sponges, dipped in mineral spirits, and began wiping away the paint, leaving it behind in the recesses. I worked slowly, choosing which spots to wipe all the way back to the original white and which spots to leave dark and grungy. Once that dried, a ton of the model is done. The next step is the shoulder pads. I base coated these in black paint, and then I put some watery deep gray into my airbrush and gave each shoulder a little puff of this for a highlight. Then for the couple of smooth shoulders, I put on some white Templars cross decals. For the others, the cross is a raised detail, so I painted these, mixing a little bit of gray into my white paint to get 3 different tones of light gray. I painted these on, making the top facing points brighter than the bottom ones. Then I took pure white paint and carefully edge highlighted, doing a little plus sign in the middle and all around the edges. These shoulders turned out so good, I feel like the decals are pretty lame in comparison. I want to touch them up a little. I put a matte varnish over the decals, and then I airbrushed a little grim black over the bottom to make a gradient, leaving them bright on top and dark on the underside. Then I took my white paint and I edge highlighted the decal. This added a lot, giving the symbol some dimensionality. I might start doing this on more of my other Templars. With the black and white done, I can move on to the red. I started by spraying some red ink onto their eyes to give them a glow. Then I base coated all the red parts with a dark red, which is pure red mixed with black paint. Then I switched to pure red and I painted on my highlights, picking a couple of spots on the trim to be bright. I came back with pure red, watered down, and I glazed this over the transition to blend them together. And then, for my secret weapon, Violent Vermilion. I mixed some of this into my red paint to brighten it, and I edge highlighted the shoulder trim. This was tricky to do, but it makes the red parts very striking. And I used this color on the lenses too, putting a dot of fiery vermilion right in the center. Now, the red isn't quite done yet. I want my checkerboard campaign badge on the knees. I base coated these with some dark tan, which I also threw onto all the purity seal papers. I mixed some olive flesh, a light tan color that I used for my Templars bases to highlight these spots. Doing a few rounds of highlighting, these models are very simple, so I don't mind splashing out on the few decorations. With the tan on there, I painted the red checkers on the knees, dark red on the bottom, and then bright red on top of each square. Then I took some grim black speed paint and I put this on all the in-between parts of their armor. The nice thing about white armor is that everything stands out really strong on top of it. These guys are pretty much the high definition version of the guys that I painted before, and I am very excited to get a second squad ready for the tabletop, because the first squad is excellent, but I feel like I don't take full advantage of them. These guys have a kind of spicy special ability called Suppressing Fire that I never take advantage of, because what I do with these guys is I leave them in Deep Strike Reserve, and then I wait till I draw a secondary card that says to be on a certain point on the battlefield, whether it's an objective or the enemy's deployment zone or inside of a terrain piece to do an action. And when I draw those cards, I drop them in a position and they do that thing, and that's great, but I do kind of want to take advantage of their special ability, Suppressing Fire. This rule is whatever these guys shoot at, if they manage to hit, which is easy to do with their 9 shots at 48-inch range, that enemy unit is suppressed and it's -1 to all their attacks. That can be pretty spicy. My immediate thought is shoot Angron and make him hit in 3s instead of 2s, which would be funny, but I think a better thing to do would be like to shoot a Rogaldorn battle tank. They have so many guns and so many shots, and making all of those hit on 4s instead of 3s, there's a little something to that. Or an Imperial Knight with their like 9 different guns, making all of those shots worse for only 75 points. I like the sound of that. And with 2 squads, I can still leave 1 in Deep Strike Reserve to take advantage of all of those movement shenanigans, but maybe starting 1 squad on the board to be doing a little suppressing. And speaking of suppressors, I want the second squad to be a little different from the first squad. You can't reinforce them to a 6-man squad, you're stuck at 3, so I'm okay with these guys being a little bit different, and where I want to express that is on the gun barrel. I really like the candy cane paint job on these barrels. It feels very much like a medieval lance, which is very appropriate for the Black Templars, but on these guys, I want to try something a little different. I put a satin varnish over my models to protect the paint already on there, then I dry brush some silver over the noble skin to finally make those guns shine. Now I can attack those gun barrels. I want to try checkering instead of a swirl. I tried brushing on the yellow, but it looked like it was going to take many coats to get good coverage, so I maxed off these parts and then sprayed on a base coat of yellow. I was hoping to be able to mask the checkers too, but it seems like it's going to be too hard to line it all up. So I pulled off the tape and I decided to bite the bullet and just freehand it all. I painted a stripe of red running along the center top, reaching down to the middle of the barrel, and then I did the same stripe on the opposite side of the tube. Then I began pinning on some stripes of yellow, breaking this original red stripe into 5 cells. With those as my starting squares, I can now paint in between to fill in the other sections with squares. After a few passes, I got the squares on there decently, and I glazed some fugue and orange contrast paint over everything to darken the yellow and give it a more saturated, colorful look. Painting this checkerboard was tricky. I had to double check constantly that I was painting the squares correctly, and at one point I completely messed up and put 6 squares on where there should have been 5. and I only learned that when I was trying to complete the next round of cells. Definitely a challenge, but this will almost certainly be my last squad of suppressors, so I'm okay with splashing out on the barrels to get them exactly how I want. I think they turned out really good, and they are very similar but different to my last squad. And now, to finish that squad, I airbrushed water down Vallejo Earth over the Zenithal base, and I let this land on the suppressor's feet too. Then I hit them with a dry brushing of Pro Acryl Olive Flesh, then I hit the base rims with some gloss black paint. But I'm not done yet. Top supporters on our website get their names immortalized as members of my crusade. Also, we offer these nameplates as a print-on-demand service from EonsOfBattle.com. I hit these names with some white primer, then some gold paint, then a wash of dark umber panel liner that I wiped clean with a makeup sponge. Once the names are looking crispy, I glued them to the front of the bases, and my second squad is ready for dust off. My second Inceptor Suppressor squad is done. Oh, that checkerboarding on the barrels took a hot minute, but it was worth it. I really like how these look. And I really hope that Games Workshop doesn't make these guys better, because if Games Workshop makes them better, they're gonna be a lot worse. Now in 40K, there is a sweet spot in between cheap and good enough, and these guys fit that like a glove. 75 points for movement 12, the grenades keyword, deep strike, guns that don't do anything, but they have a cool special ability. And if these got any better, like if they got +1 AP, or if they got hitting on 3s instead of 4s, all of a sudden their points would have to go up to like probably 100, and at that point they would be competing against Inceptors or like a Storm Speed or Hail Strike. Like they would immediately become not as good as all of the other mid-tier units. For me, 150 points for 2 squads of these suckers flying around the board doing mission actions is perfect. They do a really good job at that, and it leaves me with the better part of 2,000 points to spend on all the really cool Black Templar units that are going to rip and tear my enemy's armies. I do hope that one day Games Workshop makes a standalone kit for the suppressors, and because these are regular old Space Marines, not Gravis Space Marines, they're basically a Devastator squad. Give them some weapon options. Let these guys take heavy bolters, or maybe gravity guns. Grav guns, I want to say came out in like 2013 for the Devastator Space Marine squad, and they've never ever been good ever since. And they probably will just vanish from the game of 40K, but they shouldn't. They should randomly get attached to the suppressor squads. Now that I've got these guys done, I have a pretty good collection of fast attack units for my Space Marines, which is good because I want to have my painting desk clear for when that 11th edition launch box comes out, and that box is almost certainly gonna have some Vanguard veterans, so I'm gonna have a very fast Black Templars army in the near future. Thanks for watching.